from the Salvation Army National Headquarters, this is the Fight for Good podcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Fight for Good podcast. We're recording here in our temporary studios at National Headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia. Our temporary studios are really Elizabeth, our producer's office. Thank you, Elizabeth, for letting us invade your office one more time.
I love it when you invade my office. It's phenomenal.
We're very soon, we will not be doing this with you here.
I think I may miss it a little bit.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
Your office is very cozy.
Thank you.
And we appreciate your hospitality.
Well, I appreciate you coming in.
When we come in here, you clean things up really nicely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tell that to my mother.
Well, if your mother's listening to this, we do want to sing your praises.
Thank you.
Because you are keeping your space clean.
Gracias.
And that is greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
To my left, once again, is our wonderful and most intellectual and illustrious editorial director that we have on this building, in this office at this time, Mr. Jeff McDonald. How are you, sir?
I am well. I'll try to live up to that high bar you just set.
Well, I'm always about setting the bar real high to make sure that, everybody drowns because they can't quite reach it because, I drown myself. Well, in this particular episode, we're talking with April Foster. Jeff had an interview with April Foster, and she works for the Salvation Army in the Eastern Territory, I believe. Jeff, tell our listeners who exactly is April Foster.
April Foster is the director of the Trade for Hope initiative out of the under the auspices of the Salvation Army's Eastern Territory. April is a Salvationist who have spent, I think, 20 years in Africa doing ministry work for the Army in that region, and really considers Kenya to be her second home, if not her first. And from that experience, she was invited to become the director of Trade for Hope, which is a program that's started in Pakistan, where the Army was helping women develop enterprises on their own so that they could bring to market and then and by doing so have a sustainable income and provide for their families and really pull them up from their circumstances.
So we featured her as an expert witness. And we've also put on our website an extended interview that you had with her in regards to what she deems as products of transformation. So here's Jeff's interview with April Foster.
So could you just explain briefly what Others Trade for Hope is and how it came to be?
Others Trade for Hope is the Salvation Army's global social enterprise. We partner with over 1,200 men and women in Bangladesh, Kenya, and Pakistan. And the partnership is really around appreciation of the skills and expertise that artisans around the world have in creating beautiful handmade products and partnering together to make a market for those products and the story behind those products to be shared with other people. And so we have been working with this particular ministry since the late 1970s when it began in Bangladesh, and came directly out of work with very vulnerable women who were looking for opportunities to come out of situations that were enslaving and entrapping them, and also leading to that same situation for their children. And Salvation Army began to work very closely with these groups of women, and through counseling and literacy training, and then eventually skills training, which led to development of products. Kind of one thing led to another, and really began to look for opportunities where these products could be shared and marketed in order to support these women. And eventually retail space was set up in Bangladesh to sell those products, and then partnerships with other territories began to emerge in Norway and Sweden and Denmark, and then more recently here in the United States, to become partners with those artisans in sharing those products and the story behind them.
Yeah. So, April, you obviously have such a deep commitment to service. How did you become the director of Others Trade for Hope?
Well, I was living and serving in Kenya at the time when I think this part of the story for me began to unfold. I had been living in Kenya for 20 years, very involved in the work, Salvation Army's work with HIV and community development there, and had seen a lot of initiatives of working, with women's groups through startup funds for micro enterprise and small businesses, and, some varying degrees of success with that. And began in a very small way with 5 women in Kenya who were making products from recycled paper, and we began to look for markets locally in Kenya, and really saw a very good response with that, and that number of women began to grow in that community. And then Kenya was visited by the Others Global team, and they were looking to add a country in the Africa region to the Others network, and the territory was asked whether they would be interested in becoming part of that. And when they agreed, I was asked to give leadership to the development of Others in Kenya, which I did for 5 years, and then was approached by the Salvation Army leadership here in the States, who were wanting to promote Others in a more visible way here, whether that would be something that I would consider, and really seeing the need for expanding the markets and the opportunities for women, firsthand through my experience in Kenya. I really, had to prayerfully consider that. I mean, Kenya was home, is home in many ways, but really felt that was a door that the Lord was opening to grow this ministry and to increase opportunities for women. And so in 2014, I returned to the States and have been giving Others a full-time focus here since then.
Yeah. I know in this day and age, everyone wants measurable impacts for their application of money. Do you have any idea of what measurable impacts Others has made on some communities?
I think that, numbers of women involved, certainly a lot of qualitative, stories of change like the ones I've just shared. Every conversation we have with these groups of women, they will give, their examples of how they have started their own small businesses, aside from Others with the income that they're making, which allow them to be independent and send children to school, and even those opportunities to get a higher education, I think, are really things that begin to change not only the landscape of the individual, but that community, as well as their children become people who have more opportunities. And so I think those stories are really throughout the fabric of Others in every place where we're working. In Bangladesh, particularly with those vulnerable populations where we're dealing with trafficked and prostituted women. Since Others started, there's over 1,000 women who have been able to come out of that and permanently stay out of that, and then that directly impacts their next generation of children who are also not subject or vulnerable to that kind of exploitation. And so I think, those individual stories, and then those numbers of people starting their own businesses and really having these dramatic changes in their circumstances are, all things that we would count as successes of the other's story.
Yeah. So no doubt that it's one thing to talk about the theories of what you do, but being on the ground must be a tough reality at points. And obviously you've seen quite a bit in your 20 plus years of overseas ministry. What motivates you? What keeps you so vigilant in your work?
Well, I think for me, it's the connection with people and their stories, and being able to see change happening and transformation happening in people's lives when we partner together in a way that shows respect and upholds the dignity of people and allows them to be the decision makers in their own futures. And I think having, that's not easy. It's not that happens overnight, but I think being able to see the many, many stories of lives transformed, and when you change one life, the impact that has on the ripple effect of one life changed, one woman's life changed, the impact that has on her children and their children and neighbors and community watching and seeing that, and so I think that understanding that even though sometimes it can seem small what you're doing, but the influence and impact of one person changed is huge. And I think that keeps me going, and just a belief in the strength of people to be able to work hard for their own future and to use the gifts and talents and skills that they have in a way that not only, blesses and changes their own lives, but does that for the people around them. And it's just a privilege to be a small part of, of that story.
Of course, the Army's mission is to serve human need and to preach the news about salvation through Jesus. Is that spiritual component an important part of others? Absolutely.
I think that, it's really eye-opening for people when, for example, they travel or have an opportunity to visit Bangladesh and sit in a local Salvation Army church in a predominantly Muslim and Hindu country and community, and see a Salvation Army officer welcoming and sitting with men and women of different faiths in a Salvation Army church, and having the opportunity, because of the relationships and respect that he or she has for people, to have a very open environment where they are allowed to pray for and care for people, not only practically but also spiritually. And I think for others, none of what happens at any level could happen without there being a total reliance on, really seeking God's wisdom in terms of direction and how things are growing globally as well as at a local level, and really having that local work entrusted to people who are very conscious that the real change that we hope for people is that really life-giving change of having a relationship with Jesus Christ, and that is first shown through very practical love and care in whatever situation you're in. And then as you have relationship with people, you're able to share more deeply about what your real motivation is for the work that you're doing. So yes, absolutely. Just woven into the fabric of what Others Trade for Hope does.
Can you give me an example of that kind of spiritual awakening that you've witnessed?
Yeah, I'll give you a story of a man named Shib that we met in Bangladesh. I first met him 3 years ago, and he's a Hindu man. We were taken to visit him. We'd gone to one of the communities that was making some of the products for others, and the Corps officer and his wife were taking us on some home visits, and they brought us to the home of Shib. He had been a long-distance truck driver, had been involved in an accident that paralyzed him from the waist down, and he was now sitting. His story was he had been sitting at home. He had been the main breadwinner of the family. When we first met him, the local community had spoken to the Salvation Army and said, "Look, we're concerned about Shiv. He's not, able to do the job that he did before," and they were involved in making some products for others that involved sewing, using a sewing machine. And Shib knew how to sew, and so they came to the officer and they said, "We want you to meet, our neighbor Shib, and we're thinking that he could do some of the sewing on, for some of the products that we're making." And so the officer, went, built a relationship with Shib, and he did begin to do the sewing of products. So by the time we met him, when we went to his home, Shib was sitting at a sewing machine, making some of these products for others, which were being exported all over the world. And as we listened to his story, he said that he felt for the first time love and care for him that had come through the ministry of the Salvation Army officer in that community, and that it wasn't something that, he had experienced in his life before. And, he said, "I'm a Hindu man, but here was this Christian man who came and just, cared for me and visited me and my family and provided me with this opportunity." So fast forward 2 years after that, this just a few months ago, was back in Bangladesh and went back to the same community. And I was really surprised to see Shib sitting in the back of the Salvation Army Corps Hall where we were kind of meeting for our gathering. And I said to the officer, "I'm so happy to see Shib here. Did someone carry him here? Because the last time I had seen him, he wasn't able to walk." And he said, "You need to go. Let's go and talk to Shib. You need to hear his testimony," essentially. Well, as we started walking towards Shib, he stood up. And I'm going to cry even telling
That's quite
this
all right. No, it's dramatic, yes.
Stood up and started walking towards us, and I couldn't believe my eyes. And, we were just in amazement and said, "Shib, what's happened?" And here was this Hindu man who said, that I know that people all over the world have been praying for me. And it's because of those prayers that I'm walking today.
Oh, my goodness.
And, we were just all like bawling as we're listening to this man, give his testimony. And I think it's stories like that where someone, in this environment where you think, how does the love of God really get shown, and how do people know that for themselves in their own experience? And here was this man, through the very practical love and concern of the Salvation Army officers and, Corps people and neighbors in that community who, despite everything in his experience and his own faith, context, was able to say, "God has healed me. Because of your prayers." And so we continue to pray for Shib and for, his growing understanding of what that, love of God in his life really means, even beyond his physical healing. But, God is with and present with people in their journeys, and I think the privilege to accompany these stories and the door that's open through others to, really minister in this way is just so powerful.
Yeah. Well, we look forward to being a small part of that. I was thinking lately that probably the most powerful force in the world is prayer, but how little we tap it, how little we apply it. But that's a powerful example. What would you say to those in the West about needs and attributes of people from other cultures with which you're familiar?
People have strengths. Every person created in the image of God has strengths, and I think one trap that we need to avoid, from our perspective, is thinking about people as just poor, or just needing financial resources that we can provide. And I think that when we do that, we do the greatest disservice that we can to another human being. I think the value that we need to place on people, the hopes and dreams that people have, the skills and capacities that they have been created with to use, the strengths that they have, for endurance and, just ingenuity and to make their futures better, is something that we need to respect and we need to value, and to come alongside and learn from, and know how to partner together with people in a way that really allows them to reach into their full potential, not to become dependent on someone in an inappropriate way, but to really partner together in a way that respects those strengths. And I think the other is maybe touching on what you've just mentioned. People in so many of the environments that I've been privileged to live and work in have such a deep faith and reliance on God, and a trust that He is always present and is always working on their behalf for their good. And even in the most difficult circumstances, I think we have so much to learn from the faith of people who struggle in material ways that we can't, even begin to comprehend. And yet their faith in God is like a rock, a foundation that they know is true. And I think that, those ways that we need to see each other and learn from each other, despite what our economic lives or situations look like, that we wouldn't use economics as the way to determine who's rich and who's poor, but that we would see each other's strengths as people created in the image of God, and that we would be able to value each other in that way.
And that was Jeff's interview with April Foster. Well, Jeff, we are growing in our interviewing process here. Both you, Michelle, and myself are interviewing all kinds of different people, and coming from different walks of life, whether they're celebrities or authors, or as this individual, this is mission in action. April has a lot to say about, again, like we said at the beginning, it's transforming people's lives. What are some of your takeaways from your interview with her?
Well, first, I hope that people can sense April's heart in her discussion. She is so committed to this work and to sharing Jesus with these people through it. Her passion is just so remarkable and wonderful, and she's so consistent in it. But from being a resident of the Western world and not really familiar with other cultures to the extent that she is, I had to ask her, what would she want us to know in the Western world about this enterprise project, and how we should view people there. And she says this: God is with people in their journey. It is a privilege to accompany them as their stories unfold. And she speaks of the integrity and the commitment that these people who have relatively nothing compared to us, and the dignity that they so long to understand, and for people to know about them.
Yeah, and you hit on a couple things there. The dignity that happens, and also they are on a journey, and God is with them on that journey. It may not look like a journey that people in North America may be familiar with, but for those of us that have been to developing countries such as Kenya, you can see the joy of the Lord in people's lives. You can see how something simple as this is being used to change a village, and the ripple effects are tremendous.
Yes, and you'll see in the interview, if you read it online or listen to April, the stories of the individuals she references and what happened to them through this program are truly remarkable.
So we encourage you to learn more about others and support others by visiting their website at tradeforhope.com. Well, that's going to end another episode of the Fight for Good podcast. We really want to thank you for taking a few moments of your time to listen to us. We encourage you to subscribe to Fight for Good if you haven't yet. And wherever you listen to podcasts, in whatever manner you do, we hope that you will subscribe and give us a rating. Drop us a note. Let us know how we can improve. Let us know how God is blessing you through these podcasts. We also encourage you to follow us in all of our social media platforms. Follow The War Cry and Peer Magazine on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. So we thank you again for listening to us, and we hope you found some inspiration today and some hope in your life. And until we meet you again over the airwaves, we pray God's blessings on you, and thank you for listening. Bye for now.
Subscribe to Fight for Good wherever you listen to podcasts.